Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout, to our show, the issues and challenges of today's fire service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, and my co-host and Hangout partner, Chief Terry McGrath, is out today, but he'll be back with us next month. We've got a great group hanging out with us today. As a reminder, we do this every show. If you have any questions, feel free, jump on Twitter, fire them off to us. Just make sure you add hashtag FE Talk for Fire Engineering Talk, so we can get to you. I know a lot of you like to send messages to us. Personally, that's fine, but throw them out there for us if you can. We'd like to address them. Today, we're hanging out with what I refer to in my world as the who's who in fire apparatus specification and design and all things fire apparatus, engines, trucks, rescues, everything. We've got Chris McLoone, Bill Peters, and Ricky Riley joining us. Chris is the senior editor of Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment Magazine. He's a 25-year veteran of the fire service and currently holds the rank of safety officer. And he's been writing and he's been an editor for more than 20 years. If you've been to any of the shows, you've probably run into Chris doing great things from his end with a great magazine. Bill Peters, Billy is retired. He's you could call that being retired, what he does. He's full-time retired. He served with the Jersey City Fire Department for 28 years at the rank of battalion chief, serving 17 years as the battalion chief supervisor of apparatus. He served as a voting member of NFPA 1901 Apparatus Committee for several years and is the author of the Fire Apparatus Purchasing Handbook and the apparatus chapters of the Fire Chief's Handbook and numerous apparatus related articles. Ricky Riley is currently a firefighter, having served as captain, all different hats and everything else, with the Kentland Fire Department in Maryland, taking care of spec-in and purchasing apparatus. Ricky has served with the Clearwater, Florida Fire Department, as well as Fairfax County and Rescue in Virginia, Fire and Rescue. I said that wrong. He's also still the president, right, of Tradition Training. If you've been out there, if you do anything, if you haven't been asleep at the wheel, you've been to their classes. Traditions Training are doing programs all over North America and beyond, and doing a great job. So, welcome, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks a lot, Ricky.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on. It's just, and when I posted, I mentioned this to you before we went live. When I posted this, a lot of questions came up that. And this hour flies by. So, folks, if we don't get to some of your stuff or some of the things you asked me last night or this morning, we'll do our best. But, Chris, real quick, for some of our viewers, I'm always amazed when I travel that there's firefighters that have never heard of fire engineering. They think FDIC is like the insurance for their bank, things like that. There's not that many of them, but I am surprised. I think that's a leadership issue where the senior members aren't letting the newer members in on some great secrets and some great stuff. But what's going on? Give us kind of a rundown about Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment, the magazine, the site, everything, and what's new and happening there.
Well, for a lot of people, when you say fire apparatus and emergency equipment, first of all, it's a mouthful to try to get out of your mouth when you're telling people, and there are a bunch of people who haven't heard of us. But usually, what I tell people is we're the big one. If you see this one at your firehouse, it's the big one that kind of outweighs all the rest. So that's the first thing. But in terms of what we're doing, we kind of go off on a tangent a little bit when we talk about stations, but our bread and butter is our fire trucks and what we carry on them, and that includes the firefighters too, because we'll cover the whole array of all the different types of apparatus via apparatus profiles, delivery profiles. We cover all the products and equipment that go on the fire truck as well. So if it's SCBA, if it's extrication tools, hand tools, we cover a lot of tips and tricks. Mike Champo helps us out a lot of times with some tips and tricks for different tool mounting and things like that. So really, and this kind of goes back to when it started. It's pretty much what what it's fire trucks and what are carried on them. And so that's the print side. On the digital side, the website, we kind of take that a little bit of a step farther. We do these kinds of events. We've got webcasts that cover different aspects of fire apparatus purchasing. Bill just did one for us last week on the 10 considerations for specking a rescue truck. So we talk about apparatus broadly, but we'll also drill down to the specific types of apparatus that are out there and equipment. We've covered things like extrication equipment maintenance. We do get into the maintenance side of things also in the magazine and on the website as well. So videos. Bill's been on some videos. Ricky has done some videos for us. So and these two guys, for those who don't know, are also on our editorial advisory board. So if I'm screwing up in what I'm putting out there for everyone to read, they're telling me, dude, you got to slow down a little bit on that one. Put on the brakes. But so that's kind of what we do. Look for that big one. Look for that big magazine at your firehouse, and hopefully it goes to most of them. Sometimes you just have to kind of seek it out.
Oh, that's what I was hoping you hit on, because it's not just pictures of rigs. The site goes into so much more. And it's one of my favorite things to look at. Like I said, I love this site. I'll try to go to all the different sites for Clarion, fire engineering and so on and so forth. But it's not just about pictures of rigs and all that. There's invaluable information about, like you said, whether it's tools, stations, everything, the whole picture. And again, like you said, the firefighters riding them. I'll throw this one to Ricky. If you could, where we're at with fire apparatus, and God, there's so many different questions here, but what do you see as some of the newest things coming down the road before we get to some of those other topics we get to? What are some of the hot things you're seeing on your end and at some of the shows and that folks are finally going to, or they're stuff that we should have been doing a long time ago or whatever?
I hate to answer your question like this, but I mean, we're actually trying to go back to more simplistic stuff. But it's just because of a maintenance issue. But the big thing right now that I'm dealing with is like the multiplexing of the apparatus and trying to convince people that are, opposed. They want the relay logic systems to have that in their fire trucks because that's what they're used to. But the mechanics today that I deal with and in my organization, they want a computer. They want to be able to have, this multiplex system, type into the computer and it'll tell them what's wrong with the fire truck and they'll fix it. So, having that a dependable multiplex system, and then, the fire apparatus world's the oyster, man. There's just so much, look at Chris's magazine. There's, every month you go in that thing and you find something new and you just got to go out and test it. I certainly don't recommend going out and buying 8 or 9 of them. But, whether it be a valve, a new pressure governor, a new Kuzma, electronic thing, it's just, but I would have to say for our organization, we're really trying to get back to a more simplistic way of doing things. So it's easier to maintain than, a lot of the complex systems like electric valves and stuff like that. So if that answers your question.
Yeah. And I think you hit on something that somebody threw a topic. Hey, can you guys talk about, and I kind of wrap it into something else too. They're talking about, can we bring the hose beds lower? We've seen this, you guys, right? We've all talked about it. It's like how much more stuff can we jam on a fire engine and make them longer and higher? Now, understand if you're in a rural area, you got to carry a lot of water, and you have to have that ability to do that and so on and so forth. But, there's been some really neat stuff coming out if it works for your community. I know you need a spec rig that's a question come up as well about, your tactics, your neighborhoods, your buildings, but some of the shorter rigs that have the lower beds, I remember when I got to Louisville, me and John Ashman was the captain. John Ashby's not a chief of training, does all the spec. And John is just incredible. And we went around to each station. We snuck up on them. And we were just taking everything back. There's some of these rigs had like 6 or 7 Halligan tools and stuff. And I'm like, guys, we don't even use like a third of it. Let's keep what has to be on it per the NFPA, and then the other stuff. But we're just jamming stuff on there. Then we're over, the rig's overweight, and we're busting stuff and everything else. But where do you got? I'll throw this to you. Throw this to maybe Willie first. Do you see a little bit of a trend that way? Like Ricky, you said, kind of going backwards, which I like, about simplifying things and maybe going back to bringing the beds down, building the hose beds in the rear of the rig and on the crosslays and that. Do you see that coming up more?
Yeah, I think a lot of people want that. And as I try to tell them, everything in apparatus is a trade-off. So if you're going to, you want a low hose bed, you might have to sacrifice some water, or, you can only go so wide and so long before you start going up. So that's probably it. But as the multiplexing that Rick was talking about, multiplexing when it first came out took a pretty bad rap. It wasn't working well at all, and now everything is computerized. I mean, I had the story I always tell. I had an H3 Hummer, and I got T-boned at an intersection, and they totaled it. So I wound up getting a Ford Explorer. So on the Hummer, if you wanted the heat, you turn the fan knob on and you turn the heat up or down. In the Explorer, I got a touch screen with all kinds of controls, and I have to find the climate section of that and then start touching the screen and all that stuff. Kind of threw me a loop. But the new multiplexing, I think, is reliable enough that people start accepting it. Pretty soon, I think the hardwired relays and stuff will be phased out.
Well, do you guys think that the fire chiefs and the people making decisions out there when it comes to apparatus we had Pat Siddons on here, a while back, and we were talking different stuff. And my question has always been, two parts. One is, if more fire chiefs would actually say, this is what we want, whether it's, we want you to design a seatbelt system that works. We want you to design rear lights. We for the longest time, we pull up and now we're doing this 45 to block. And at the time, all the lights were shooting this way with the lumen, and you're taking some of your best reflective stuff and, throwing it that way. And just things like that. Do you think that the people out there that are buying this stuff are using the right people to help them? You guys get to see a lot of rigs. I've seen some where I went, God, who designed this one? They go, well, the chief did. I said, well, does the chief ride this anymore? This compartment doesn't work in this. But do you guys see that? I'll throw it out to you. Are we not using in some places the right people to help spec the rigs?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, Chief. But it really all depends. It depends on how you build your truck committee. I think ultimately, there are. And Bill could probably give you a better idea of what the size of it should be ultimately. But really, I mean, you kept saying chiefs there, and I think you can have chiefs, but they can't be so old that they only want to build something the way they've always done it. But Ricky and I were down in Florida at a conference a couple months ago, and he brought this up, and I hate to steal any fire he may have just been getting ready to jump into, but you've got to listen to the firefighters who are riding the rigs every day, which is exactly what you just said. They are the ones who are going to be able to really tell you what is needed and really implement some of those things. But the other major thing I think is that you have got to have a mechanic or an emergency vehicle technician on the committee, because when you get into the maintenance of these things, they are the ones who are going to be servicing them. They are the ones who are going to be very frustrated if I always use the example of the electronic valves. The electronic valves, if they are what you want, are wonderful. You can put them in all sorts of different places on the rig. But if you haven't consulted with the mechanic to ask them where the best spot would be for accessibility, they're going to be cursing whoever designed that pumper, for example, as long as they have to work on it. So, it's to me, from what I've read and from what I'm hearing, out there, there are some chiefs out there who Well, it could also be actually that the firefighters are just blaming the chief because they built a bad truck, and so they just, throw it back over
That
to
would
him.
never happen.
But sometimes there are people on those committees who don't ride the trucks enough to really know what is right for the current makeup of the district. So I'm sorry, I talked enough there. I'll throw it out to
Oh,
the
no,
other
that's
two
fine.
guys.
Ricky, I think Ricky, you had something, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think that's one of the things that I started in Florida, is that we always made sure that we had a good makeup. We had an officer, a driver, and a firefighter that went out with us on every trip. So now that I've made this move to the organization I serve now, is that we have the same thing. We take out the drivers, and we just did 3 ladder trucks, and we took out the captain. So they all have a say in the rig, and they go back and push it back out to the people in the field that, hey, we got this, we got that. They have the ownership of the vehicle. At half the time I say, if I put enough USB ports and cup holders on it, everybody's going to be happy, man. It's, as long as you got a place to plug the phone in and put your coffee cup, it'll be a great fire truck. But they tell me what they do. I mean, I'm not riding in the back of a fire truck anymore. I'm in a Tahoe, and so how they want their ladders mounted, how they want their compartments laid out, that's entirely up to them. We have a set amount of equipment that we have to carry, like Chief Lasky was talking about, and they tell you where to put it, because they're the ones that are going to have to be taking it off. And I think they really take ownership. I mean, I have 2 technicians that go out with me every trip, because they're the core, and it's phenomenal to watch how they've grown and matured, and now know the process, which is something obviously you need to pass on, to that next group that's coming on, to how to spec trucks and how to go deal with the manufacturers. So.
Well, and there's almost, excuse me, just per ISO, there's almost 40,000, just under 40,000 fire departments in the United States alone, let alone what we have with our brothers and sisters in Canada. And I understand, you guys do, I know this, you understand this, that in some places, especially a smaller department, the chief may be the guy or gal that's the person they have to go to when it comes to spec in a rig, because, that's just, they're the most experienced, whatever, so on and so forth. But I want to go back to what you said. It's so key. The people that are riding the rigs, and this is going to go right into kind of Willie's apparatus committee, is if we're not asking the people riding the rigs, what are you looking for? It's like when you build a firehouse. I've been in firehouses. I've been in one where I was working not too long ago. I'm like, who designed this? This is not even, this is not set up. The bunk rooms are all wrong, and this is not right. And, you've seen you've heard them and seen them, with the rigs where I went to one place. This is a major metro department, and they had someone that had never spec rigs before specking the rigs because they promoted them politically. And I remember the ladder trucks came, and the only way you could say, he wanted the ladders to be less messed up from like the snow and ice in winter. So they put them there, they were sealed off on the sides on the ladder truck. But in order to get the ladders off, you had to slide them out the front. Well, in order to do that, you had to pull the mirrors in on the doors of the rig each time to do it. I'm like, the small compartment, the guys were showing me this rig, and they open this little compartment. There's I always tell little tiny, little baby Halligan, about that big, with a mallet, like a little baby Halligan. And I said, is that for like the little firefighter to use? And they go, no. I said, where's the real Halligan? They go, well, over here. I go, why? Well, they made the compartment too small. I said, and I asked, I said, who designed that? And they said, the chief. I said, no disrespect to any chiefs out there, but if you're not right, like you said, if you're not riding the rigs, I mentioned John Ashman spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in fire apparatus the 12 years out of Louisville. The only thing I said was, John, I want them lit up right, and I want you to talk to the guys. And that's where we went with it. And he was a captain that headed up, he was the lead on the committee with our mechanic and everything else. But if we're not asking the troops, the people are out there stretching hose, doing just like the firehouses, I think they're pretty smart. I think a lot of the firefighters, we can't give them everything, but I think they're pretty smart people. Willie, don't you? That if we just ask them some questions, they'll give us some good things at least to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in Jersey City, what I typically would do is when we were replacing, say, a pumper, I would take our latest acquisition and bring it to the firehouse and talk to the firefighters and all, and have them look at the newest one, and compare it to what they had and see, what their ideas were, like what they liked or didn't like on the newest apparatus. And then, we would take those ideas and go from there. But something you brought up about the committee, if you have like a 10-man committee, it's like, it gets out of control, it gets unruly. As a matter of fact, I was with one fire department in Long Island, and they were getting 5 pumpers, so they had representatives from all the different fire companies there, and we decided on the spec. It was going to be a side mount pump and so forth. And we get to the pre-construction conference, and the one guy says, "I want to go talk about top mount pumps again." And we had beat that horse to death the whole time in all the committee meetings, and it was a little crazy, but he was quickly quieted down, and we went on about our business. But I think bringing somebody from the maintenance section is important, and a company officer, somebody who's going to use the rig. So those are important details, as well as any drawings, pictures, ideas that you have to bring them to the pre-construction conference so they can be incorporated into what you're trying to build.
Well, and let me throw this to you guys too, and anybody jump on it, please. You mentioned, the shops. You mentioned, EVTs, Chris, and everything else. And we were so lucky, God, we were so lucky down here to have this guy was Edgar Chief Covey. I made the division chief over apparatus. Oh my God, incredible resource. Talk about, how hard is it for a lot of these places to get people certified or to get their stuff to, there's enough, I know there's great places that service rigs that have all the mechanics for you, but I guess what are the options out there for them when it comes to making sure they've got good mechanics taking care of their rigs, looking at their rigs?
That's a tough one, and I might throw this one right over to Ricky because he was just on a panel recently that discussed this very topic. It is hard to find the emergency vehicle technicians that have gone through that process to get that. Obviously, on a larger municipal department, if they're paying well, they're going to be able to attract that group. On the volunteer side, at least my experience on the volunteer side is that you really almost have to go to either the service department of the manufacturer. A lot of times the dealer will have a service department, and if you have a good relationship with them, most problems take care of themselves very, very quickly. But really, unless there are some other places that will service fire apparatus, and they're very skilled at it. And I got off onto a tangent there, and hopefully I'll be able to bring it back. But and I find that on the volunteer side because really, there's a couple things. There are fewer firefighters that are joining the service now necessarily that have that kind of mechanical background for any number of reasons. But I think the bigger thing, and because I don't want to start going after younger firefighters, I think the bigger reason is a timing thing on the volunteer side. I know that in the 25 years that I've been in, and that's very, very small. It's a small time frame. But we do monthly preventive maintenance checks on the trucks, but just about everything else that's beyond fluid replacement maybe and light bulbs are sent out. Whereas back in the day, I can remember one of our engineering officers backing the trucks into the parking lot to change the oil. That's just one example of just there's no time to do that anymore, and a lot of the guys just don't have that. I know I feel comfortable changing the oil in my own car. I would not feel comfortable doing one on a fire truck. I'd be a little nervous that I'm going to screw something up to the point where there's going to be a pretty tremendous problem.
Well, and having the right people, like you said, look at this stuff that, nowadays with everybody that's lawsuit happy and liability reasons and things and warranties and so on and so forth. Ricky having those kind of people, I think it's getting tougher. That's kind of why I went that way, to find the people away from those. I used to say, and I'll say this ahead of time, folks, in a joking manner, if you want to be a millionaire, create a CAD system that works for us on the fire side as well as it works on the law enforcement side, and build some fire apparatus and provide the backup, provide the maintenance. If you could just follow up with helping us take care of the rig, I promise you'll be millionaires. And I used to say that because that was the hardest thing in the world for the longest time, to find places in your area where you didn't have to flatbed something forever to go bring it somewhere to get some work done, on the rigs. And so, Ricky, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to find those people that have those qualifications.
Yeah, I mean, our problem is that we have mechanics, but then as you get them trained, which is difficult. I mean, the EVT certifications are, I'm not gonna say crazy, but it's a lot, and it costs money and it costs time away from the shop. But the private vendors, go in and try to find the municipality that's trained somebody, and then here, I'm going to give you this much more money, come work for me.
Yeah, stealing.
But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, but because I told our guys that we got to stop trying to find that top tier guy. We're gonna have to find the entry level guy and train him to the top tier. And if he leaves, he leaves. I mean, that's the fire service today. I mean, trying to hire firefighters, and they chase the dollar, or they chase the retirement system, which is all good because obviously whatever best for your family. But we got a good core of mechanics here now, and hopefully they're going to stay with us, and we treat them well, and we certainly keep the fleet in service. But we depend a lot on vendors also to help us with that. So.
Well, and we're fortunate here. Like I said, we've got a great one in Denton, Texas, that takes care of there's follow through. They do a great job with it. But before we move on, I want to throw this out to you guys. It's kind of funny because no matter where you travel, you hear it's always the same circus, different clowns, right? You hear the same stuff, the same complaints. The chief doesn't listen. We don't have enough money. Recruitment and retention on the volunteer side, so on and so forth. And I hear this a lot. It's the truck checks. I'll go to a association in a volunteer department or career guys. It's like pain and suffering asking them to check the rig. Where I mean, that was one of my favorite things to do in the morning. Was to get my rig all ready, or when I was on the box. I used to tell people on my volunteer department, used to drive my wife crazy because I could drive by the firehouse and going and turn in there and go check my rig because I know somebody opened up a compartment door, or somebody did something, or left a Cold-Hersey switch on back there. And I'm like, so the truck checks are not just busy work. Let me throw one thing. It's Salka. John Salka says it all the time. When he was a probie, they had a captain. He used to make him polish all the brass couplings when they were brass on the rig. This whole milk crate. He says sometimes they look like I just did them yesterday, but oh my God, Salka go polish the brass, polish the brass, polish the brass. He says, I don't forget, I got called upstairs and the cap says, hey, he's on the phone. He goes, how many double females, how many males do we have? And he goes, we've got He goes, but that one, I'm coming to talk to you, it's out around. He goes, I knew every single, by the time I was into it, it wasn't as much about polishing as about knowing my shit, knowing my stuff. And I think we overlooked that when it comes to the rig checks, that it's just not busy work. And again, I'll throw this out to all three of you. That's it. In fact, if we do a better job checking the rigs, we might catch some things sooner that become big things that the mechanics are going, why didn't you tell me about this sooner? So I'll throw that out to you about the importance of the rig checks and things that are overlooked.
I think one of the things is to have a structured program. When I was in Jersey City, we had 29 companies, and somebody had invented an apparatus check sheet that the chauffeur had to run through the check sheet each day. But on the check sheet, there were so many things. It was like everybody used to just check the whole thing without actually checking the rig. So I met with some people in the companies and all, and we discussed it, and we narrowed it down to the important things to be done daily, oil, coolant, fuel, all that stuff, and clean the rig and make sure your tank is full and everything works. And then we had every Saturday, the weekly check, which was the more extensive check. And it was well received because it was a more realistic way to do it rather than throwing this big check pad out to them. And the guys, they weren't going around and checking 30 items, and item for item. And they would just check it off and initial it and hope for the best. So we made it more practical, and I think that that worked out.
Well, it's like cleaning the windows of the firehouse every day versus Thursdays as window days, and being able to break that down into what needs to be checked every time you check the rig,
right?
Versus I mean, and I think the guys appreciate that because a lot of places they I'll be honest, we're asking our people to do a lot more with less, and especially less time, and in most places, and now. And if I get hit with one more question about this without somebody using hashtag FE talk here, we got to change this because already 5 people. There's a bunch of things we're going to talk about, but let's talk about one of the big hot issues right now is the whole clean cab. I'm glad we're doing 2 things in the fire service as a whole. I'm glad that I always say I'm blessed to work for a boss, Chief Bobby Halton, that supports mental health awareness and figuring that out and helping people with that. On the other side of it, we're doing better with cancer awareness, but without throwing too many things out there, because I want to hear from you guys, there's so many challenges that are facing a lot of fire departments now as to how they're going to, before the freight train runs off the tracks here, what your thoughts on what you see coming with the clean cabs, clean compartments, or whatever, when it comes to that stuff. I'll just throw that to you guys because I've got about 5 people I've asked about for you guys to address the whole clean cab thing.
I will say that when I post anything about the clean cab concept on any of our social media accounts, it usually blows up pretty well. But it is. I have yet to find. I see people who are really for it, and I see people who are like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of times when they do say that, they focus in on one thing. One of the big things with the clean cab concept that I've seen people really get all wound up about are taking the SCBA out of the cabs. That is a definite hot button there. And when I personally look at the clean cab concept, and hopefully this doesn't come out as sounding not negative, but like not well informed or something like that. I look at it almost as an a la carte kind of thing, because there are several different things you can do and say that you are implementing the clean cab concept. There is taking SCBA out of the cabs. It also has to do with the surfaces within the cabs and how easily cleanable they are, the hard surfaces or even the seating, the upholstery on the seating. It also has to do with what type of HVAC system you use and the filtering systems you're using for it. So there are a number of different things that you can do, and those are just a few. There are a number of different things you can do and say that you are taking steps toward that. The best thing that I ever heard about these sorts of things was from Beth Gallup, who is she's with Puget Sound Fire Department up in Washington, and I asked her at that time because she did a webcast for us on the Healthy and Healthy Out program that they did up there, and I said, when it's to a fire department that might not have the financial resources to implement some of these things, when you look at something like a whole program like that, it kind of blows your mind a little bit to think like, how in the world am I going to do this for one truck, let alone several? And the one thing she said was to do something, just take a step in that direction, because a lot of these things do impact operations as well. And Rick, before when you asked me to come on, we touched on this a tiny little bit, and I don't want to turn this into an operational discussion because we are focusing on apparatus. But when you get into some of these things about not carrying having specific compartments on the rig to carry your PPE back to the station so that you're not putting it into the cab and possibly contaminating it there. When you talk about all these things, you're then getting into operational stuff, because now you're saying if they're taking off their gear and not using it again for the rest of the call, you have to replace them, with other people. So now you're playing with, dispatch procedures and the whole 9 yards. The other thing with the clean cab concept, and this goes back to something Bill mentioned a little while ago, is that no matter what you do, just remember there is always that trade-off. So if you decide you're going to take the SCBA out of the cab, remember where you're going to put it is probably going to take storage away from something else. So there are those things to consider. But I will say, like I started off with, and I'm sorry if I went off on too many directions. This is something that I think is not a bad thing for the fire service, the clean cab concept, but it is it can be a very divisive thing when you get some diehards on either side of the equation. I'll let Ricky and Bill.
Well, and we were talking the other day about, and it goes back to, at least take one step, because I was like, God, how are some of these departments going to do that? We just went through bad snow in a lot of places, and I'm like,
right.
Okay, so I'm going to take if there's no warming bus there, or if there's nowhere, I'm going to take my gear off. I'm all sweaty. I didn't bring my clothes with me. Well, now I got to buy jumpsuits, and there's all these different things. I will say this about doing at least one thing. It's like when it comes to the cancer stuff, if we just practice better hygiene, if we just cleaned up after a call better, kept our gear a little bit better, I'm not saying you have to, change your whole life, but if you did nothing more than some of those things, that might help. But look at it, Willie and then Ricky, I just think this is a big topic, and Chris, you touched on it. What do we implement? What do we not implement? And how do these departments do this stuff with no or limited funding already?
I think Chris had a good point. It's kind of an a la carte thing. In the Northeast here, when you have your career departments, New York City, Jersey City, Newark, sometimes you're going from one fire to another or one call to another. And with the weather conditions, it's impractical to think that you're going to strip down and put your gear in some compartment. And then even at that, unless the department has the resources to have a whole second set of gear that you can replace it with, you're going to be out of service for a long time. The other thing is, I think anybody can implement some of the steps of the clean cab as far as the cleanable surfaces and things like that. And one of the manufacturers had even suggested if your SCBAs are contaminated, to bag them and put them right back to the station with them in bags, decontaminate them, and then put them back in the seats if that's where you want to ride with them. A couple of rigs I saw last year at FDIC, I think it was Palm Beach, had a separate compartment outside the rear of the crew cab that they were going to keep their SCBAs and gear in. So when they get to the scene of a fire, now they're going to get out and get dressed. And I think one of the pictures in Fire Apparatus showed, I think Dade did a similar thing with a cab with a slide out compartment. That just wouldn't work. For instance, in Jersey City, with parked cars right next to the rig and everything. Plus, a lot of times you roll up. You're throwing ladders and stretching hose. I can't picture the guy there putting his gear on out in the street, before doing that attack. So it may work in a warmer climate where most of the calls are EMS calls or something like that. But I think there are steps you can take, such as the impervious surfaces and things like that. But it's certainly not one size fits all.
What those two guys said.
I want to throw this to Ricky here, but I want to mention, if you guys remember, we were talking antique rigs before we came on. You look at some of the old rigs with the bench seat, and I know we can't have that again, but you could actually wash out a rig. You could clean, you could do stuff. We can't even keep the back of the ambulances clean that we're using. Even guys are wearing gloves, the same gloves they're using when they go to drive the rig, that they were just handling everything, and they clean that, but they forget to clean that. But so Ricky, you're because this, again, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of, I think, negative. Your thoughts on the whole concept, what's doable, what's not?
On it at all.
What's doable, what's not?
I don't want anybody to have cancer. Nobody does.
Can't
imagine the amount of money that a department would have to spend to do it correctly. I mean, you couldn't budget for it. I mean, where's who's cleaning it? Are you wearing a particle mask while you're putting the SCBA in the bag? It's unfathomable to me. It's like the hazmat with the wet paint concept. Or like the videos they started with, by putting the powder over all the firefighters and make them go sit places. I mean, we got to start with those little pieces that we can digest. It's like digesting NFPA standards. You take the pieces that you can do and that you can finance and do it. I mean, but if obviously if you get enough push about it, and this is what's really linking us to a lot of our cancers is wearing our gear or having the gear in the cab, which I mean, and I'm no scientist, I'm no doctor. I don't know what's exactly causing it, but we got to draw a line. When we go out to a call, we're supposed to be able to deliver service quickly and efficiently. I mean, the internet is covered here in the last couple months with these videos of firefighters showing up and babies are getting thrown out of windows and having to throw ground ladders. And obviously, we've learned that fires are burning a lot quicker now and getting to flashover state. And what are we doing as the fire service? We're protracting it out, our reactionary time. So it's a dangerous slope, and I'm glad I'm not the guy that has to make those decisions anymore, because I'm all about public service and getting that service. And I just think this is a bad way at the front part. At the end part of the incident, that's a whole different animal. If we want to get bag gear, bag SCBA, but then how many companies are going to be out of service, and how big's your department? What's your staffing levels, and how are you going to manage that? It's just crazy.
Exactly. And we were given 2 sets of gear to everybody in Louisville in 2000, the year 2000, long before. And, and there was always that, well, when do I actually have to change to my backup set, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of this, and I guess, goes back to the baby steps, kind of what you mentioned, Chris, is, like I said, on the cancer side, that, with yourself, the hygiene. How about hygiene for the rigs? And I've been very outspoken when I've said I have, the whole pride and ownership thing, and you've been blessed as a volunteer career firefighter to do something pretty incredible. Little kids want to be like you. They have toys. There's aisles in the toy stores of stuff that is all about you. But what used to be bothersome is to walk, pull in the back of a firehouse, and no problem, guys and gals. I love the fact that you love washing and waxing. I did it too. Your Ford F-1000 pickup truck and your Jeep and your bass boat. And I love seeing it all clean. But when you walk through the apparatus bay and you see a $1 million plus ladder truck or a $500,000 pumper or better, that's all messed up and dirty, and the dashboard, I'm like, I can't live that way personally. Second, I'm not OCD, but I can't. But at least take care of the stuff. That's, I said, if you keep your gear clean, if you keep the rig clean, it's a little bit easier to peck off some of this other stuff once in a while. But I just don't know. I'm back to the whole funding thing, because I do budgets, and I don't know how people, Homer Robertson, our friend Homer with Fort Worth, they tried something years ago, which I thought was a pretty good concept. Was they're experimenting back then with the boot scrubbers. They look like wheel chock holders on the side of the rig, and there was 2 of them. One just had a high pressure stream that was like a fan, and the other one had a rolling brush with water. And you kind of backed up to it. You did like a horse. You put your hoof back up there, and that thing, at least to knock the chunk. And I'm like, well, does it actually do it or not? But at least they were trying something. But I just don't see. It goes back to the being affordable and taking companies out of service when we're already short. I don't know. I think like you said, it's a slippery slope. It's a dangerous one, and you don't want to say the wrong thing, because people are a wee bit too sensitive nowadays. But I think there's got to be some common sense in this too.
It's a work in progress, is kind of how I would look at it. I mean, the concept of it is really not that old. I don't think, maybe 1 or 2 years since I started to really hear the clean cab concept really being used as a term. So, it's part of the awareness of cancer. And I think it all really comes down to what is best for what you somebody, not like Ricky said, he's not the one that has to make the decision on it, but like what that higher up, maybe it's on the health and safety side of the department, what they think is best for their firefighters, for their communities, and what's best for efficiency. I mean, it might not be best for efficiency to have SCBA in a compartment and behind the cab for that department. They may decide, no, we want to be out and ready to go as soon as we get there, kind of a thing. There are other departments that might say, we've kept them out of the cab for years. It hasn't affected us at all. And then there are other things that you can do. There's at least one SCBA. Just thinking about the SCBA, there's at least one SCBA manufacturer that has removable soft goods for their harnesses that can be taken off and sent out to be laundered, and very quickly you can get that SCBA back in service if you've got other soft goods, other straps and stuff like that, cushions for the straps on the truck maybe. So I mean, again, it's a work in progress, and if all that comes out of it is a heightened awareness for what we can do, just like you said, with the little things day to day to help reduce our exposure to contaminants that might cause cancer down the line, then it's not a bad thing. Even if that term clean cab concept goes away next year and never comes back, at least that awareness has been established.
Well, I think the budget, and I mentioned this before, you can't have everything because things cost money. Whether you're building a firehouse, there's a lot of great ideas that come with it, but you have a budget to work with sometimes. The same thing with apparatus. But I've said for years that if fire chiefs would just say, they would tell the manufacturers or the architects for the firehouse, for the apparatus, this is what I want. I for years, the whole seatbelt thing. We're on a seatbelt craze. We give out awards if you sign the pledge or the lie your ass off card that you say you wear your seatbelt all the time. But we make seatbelts, we make SCBAs and seatbelts almost the same size. So then we put extenders on it. I said, you can go to Six Flags and get into Mr. Freeze or Superman or whatever the hell those rides are, and this thing will go, and then 100 miles an hour, but we can't figure out how to build something that firefighters can use to keep them restrained in a cab while they're wearing their gear, or if they're sitting with an air pack on. I don't think it's impossible. And I think if we lean on some of the folks that we're giving the money to come up with, some ideas and actually do the stuff we want them to do, I think some of that is solvable. But again, until we say something, it's just going to keep on rolling down the road, So, hey, I'll throw this one at you because this came up. Tillers versus mid mounts versus rear mounts on ladder trucks. That was one of the first things that someone threw in. One of it was because we were at our radio show with me and my best buddy John Salka, and the whole topic came up. Who the hell needs tillers? You can't do it a bit. And I'm like, versus a mid mount versus a rear mount. Throw this out to you guys, and I think I know where this is going to go. But tillers versus mid mounts versus rear mounts. What thoughts have to go in when you're speccing that ladder truck? Willie, you want to jump in there? Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there's several things. First of all, tiller trucks are considerably longer than any of the straight jobs, so you have to have room in the fire station for it. And you need skilled operators at both ends of it. That's the other thing. It's a funny story from Jersey City. We kept one tiller truck in one section of the city where the streets are incredibly tight. And I was reviewing an accident report. The tillerman hit a parked car. So he said, as we approached the corner, the car on the right side was too close, so I hit the car on the left side. So where are you going to go with that? But anyway, straight jobs, whether it's a mid mount or a rear mount, again, it goes back to what you want to do with it. Mid mounts give you a better opportunity for a rear hose bed if you're doing like a quint concept or you need that hose bed. Sometimes the ladders are more accessible there. When you're operating towards the front, you don't lose the length of the bed section if you like nose into a building. However, again, if you're operating towards the front at a low angle, the cab might interfere with you. On the plus side, mid-mount turntable is closer to the chauffeur, so he has a better idea when he's spotting the truck where to go with it. And rear mounts, obviously, the length of the truck is the length of the bed section of the ladder, or just about, and so it can be more of a compact truck rather than a mid-mount where the length of the bed ladder extends beyond the cab, so you have the length of the ladder plus the cab. Maybe Ricky, you got any thoughts?
Who doesn't want to ride around in a fire truck that's a tiller? That's just unfireman-like, unfirefighter-like. I mean, if you have the money, buy one. But hey, in the real world, if you had 3 truck companies, I would like one of each. You want to have every tool in the toolbox. I'm a big proponent of tillers. I think they the maneuverability, the amount of ground ladders that you can carry, the equipment that you can carry is good. But like Mr. Peter said, we got to have 2 skilled drivers, and and they got to be really good at their job. The mid-mount stuff is, I kind of put that in a tower world. A mid-mount tower, we want to flow a lot of water at a low level, and and we're going to give up compartment space and storage to get that device. And of course, if you get a rear mount, either would be an aerial or tower, you get like kind of the best of both worlds. You get all your compartment space and you get the device. And obviously, there's a lot of ways now to get that ladder closer to the ground. If you want to do a sidewalk sweep or something like that, there's I call it the Wichita lean, because that's the first place I saw it, by using the torque box and the jack system to get that ladder closer to the ground. So kind of like a midship mount would do. But, they're all 3 great devices. And I think Rick started off with them. And it's got to be what's for your community. A Mac aerial scope is not going to work in rural America. You don't need a Mac aerial scope, an aerial scope for that type building construction or geographic area. You just could need a regular ladder truck. So you got to do a lot of soul searching on that one to find out what's going to work in your area. And of course, I'm always going to vote for a tiller. A tiller and a tiller and an aerial scope, I'll be a happy guy. But
Well,
personal preference, not my department's.
and you guys have seen, I mean, and that's where I was kind of going with it, where a lot of the tillers in the old days were associated with the older urban cities with narrow streets and corners and being able to maneuver. And now I know you guys are seeing it as well. We're building these 4 and 5 and 6-story apartment townhomes, imitation taxpayers with, everybody's kind of building newer areas that look old, and they're allowing, you argue with your building commission people, your planners saying, look, I have to set outriggers down. It's not just driving down the street. I have to be able to do this, and so on and so forth. And so I'm seeing a lot of departments that are having to move towards a tiller to get into some of these newer neighborhoods a little bit easier than what they're doing. But now you look at Chicago with their snorkel squads they've had forever since Quinn came up with them, and they use those short ones, those 55. They're incredible. I mean, they can get them in spots where people can't get their cars, and they do an incredible job in Chicago using those. I was on a snorkel for a long time on the west side, and I hated it because the big one, not the short one. I wish we had a small, because placement, about the old story. This is your best reach. The higher up you go, the lower you go. The further it just wasn't, you had to get your asset close to things. But I think it goes back to, like you guys said, we were talking about tactically. So many people get hung up on their favorite tactic for that fire rather than the best one, right? They're hung up with their favorite tactic rather than what's the best one to use that particular fire. They're hung up with what is their favorite rig, with maybe not what's the best one for that particular area of town or whatever. And I'm the toolbox guy too, Ricky. I mean, I don't have any wrenches or socket sets with just 1 or 2 sockets in there. I've got a whole bunch of them that I can turn to. So, I just think that we're getting to a point where you've got to make sure you go out and take a look at what you're matching your rig to. Match your rig to your community in order to do the best thing you can, whether it's a pumper or whatever, depending on water and no water and streets and hydrants and everything else, right?
I mean, Chris, I'm sure Chris will tell you that. I mean, if you check with any of the manufacturers, the tiller is on a tremendous comeback. And and going into Pennsylvania and some of those areas there, I mean, the tiller's really making a comeback, because the companies have adopted some of that urban suburban concept of throwing a lot of ground ladders. We're getting that building stock like Rick was talking about, those 4 and 5 story, fake taxpayers or just apartments. So I mean, they have to adjust the way they operate. And like Manheim Township, which is a phenomenal combination apartment there in Pennsylvania, is just using that ladder concept tiller. One half is like all rescue equipment, and the other half's all firefighting. He doesn't have to run a rescue truck. He's got everything on the tiller, like we were talking about with that toolbox. So, it's just got to be what's best for your area, and you just can't always go, that's always been what's good for my area. You got to look at what your area is going to become in the next 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, and we do that through the planning stages, of getting with your community. So.
The community, and Chris, you mentioned just what Ricky just said, and Willie said earlier about you got to understand what you're ordering. Will it actually fit in the firehouse? And we need to be building firehouses. I think it's the whole package. You started off the whole show with talking about what the magazine does, and the website, that you don't just put pictures of rigs up. It's about the rigs. It's about the firehouse they go in and everything that's in the firehouse and the people that are riding them and everything they're wearing and all the tools they're using. It's the whole package. I think we've hit on that with not specing the right size compartments, having fire. I know people that have ordered fire apparatus that when they got them wouldn't fit in the firehouse. You guys do too. Without mentioning about 8 or 9 compartments I could think of right now that did this. Someone's got to. I mean, it goes back to planning and not being in a hurry. Chris, it goes back to what you said about making sure that we plug all those things together. Equipment, gear, guys, stations, everything. Otherwise, we're always going to have those problems, right?
Yeah, it really does. And yeah, like you just said, it really goes down to planning. And it's funny, and I'm probably going to go off in a place you didn't think it was going to go, but when we were talking about the clean cab concept, and even when you were just talking right now, one of the things I thought of when we were talking about those little things that you can do was, let's start with a clean station. Let's start there before we even leave to go anywhere, and make sure we're doing everything back at the firehouse to make sure that our guys are staying healthy and safe there. But beyond that, I can think of there's one station in particular I'm thinking of right now that ended up having to build out of its firehouse in order to accommodate the truck that they spec. And, it really is amazing that we're even talking about that, because you would think that would be something that would just come to mind right off the bat. I mean, we have it in my firehouse. We've got 4 bays. 2 of them are in the old section of the firehouse. One of them would never be able to even hold one of today's fire trucks on it because it would fall into the basement. The second one butts up against the ladies' room, so we're very limited with what we can do size-wise with the truck there. And then the other 2, we're in pretty decent shape. We can move things around a little bit. So you really have to think about all of those things when you're specking out. We spec'd out a rescue truck a couple years ago, and we went with the extra long cab because it really did give us, especially people like me. I'm 6'4", and we have another couple of people in the firehouse who are 6 feet plus. And when you're sitting against each other, having those few extra inches with that extra long cab really helps. But then when we talked again, and it's all kind of coming together, everything's a trade-off. So when we went with the extra long cab, we had to shorten the body a little bit, and then we might have even had to shorten it a little bit more because now we're backing into the radio room if we don't take care of that aspect of it. So it really does all tie in together. And when you think about it, one of the first things you ought to be thinking of is how you're going to store the thing, because you can get yourself into a heap of trouble if you're in the mid-Atlantic when during the winter, if you're storing a pumper out in the parking lot, or a wet rescue out in the parking lot because you can't fit it into the engine bay.
I get the message would be, if the person who is ordering your apparatus or building your firehouses can't buy the right size shoes, what I have, saying that don't let them buy the rig or build the firehouse. They can't buy their own damn shoes. Hey, we're getting close here. I had this as kind of a closer for today's show. Like I told, the hour flies by. We got a few minutes here yet, so folks, hang with us. and I'll throw this to Willie first, then Ricky, then back to Chris. Advice, and we've kind of covered a lot of this, but again, you're going to close remarks on advice to those ordering. And that's you could do it. You could tie the firehouses to it too. But those ordering the apparatus, if you had them sitting around you having coffee at FDIC, what would you tell them? What advice would you give when it comes to ordering apparatus? Willie, throw it to you first.
I think the first thing is you got to determine your primary mission, what you hope to accomplish with this rig. Unfortunately, a lot of people want to, do everything on every rig, and what happens, I sometimes relate that to a Swiss Army knife. It does a lot of things, but it don't do any of them real good. If you need a good screwdriver, you want to get your hands on that Craftsman screwdriver. You don't need a Swiss Army knife to try to take a big screw out. So I would say, try to outline what exactly you want that rig to do, how many people are going to ride on it realistically. A lot of volunteer departments want to put 10 men in the cab, and it's not comfortable for anybody in the cab then. And finally, the third advice, Chris, you got to get shorter firefighters. That's all. You guys are
That's okay. Shorter. I like. Hey, Ricky, same thing, buddy. Advice, pal.
It's got to be more simplistic. The complex systems working on our firegrounds just don't seem to work that well. And that's not a hit on anything. It's just, it needs to be simplistic. It needs to be dependable. And then when we get this group together, don't overthink it. I mean, everybody always says, oh, we want to go back to older fire trucks. Well, you can't design a new fire truck and get the same result. You gotta go somewhere in the middle, man. Don't go down to measuring the fire truck down to inches and half inches, and this hose isn't going to fit. It's the engineers at whatever manufacturer, they got a lot of guys with plastic pocket protectors, and I guarantee you they're going to build you the right fire truck. So listen to the engineers there, but you can't discredit, obviously, that I wholly believe in the operational personnel that are riding the fire truck. But build you a nice small fire truck with a low hose bed. Hashtag low hose bed.
Hashtag low hose bed. I like that. There you go. The save for the day. Chris?
I think that there are two things. They go together, but there are two things really to do, and I think it is they are to listen and to empower. And you need to listen to the people who are riding the fire trucks. You need to listen to the mechanics, and you need to listen to the officers. But you also need to empower those three groups so that they are being proactive in observing, in seeing what is out there and bringing it back to you. If they don't know that you are willing to listen to them and that you value their opinion on things and that you value their input on the truck, then they're never going to do it. And then you're going to get one and they're going to decide that they hate it and they're going to blame the chief, who really, never who never made it clear that he wanted or she wanted the input to begin with. So I really think that listening and listening to your people and empowering them to contribute to the process is critical. Now, obviously, there is a managerial thing there where you can't just, open it up to the 700 firefighters on the force and say, we want to know what you think about all these trucks. It's unmanageable. But, when you do that, you appoint some of the firefighters to be on that committee. As we talked about earlier in the show, make sure there's an officer, make sure there's a maintenance person, make sure there's a firefighter, make sure you're, tying it all together, but make sure they know that you want to hear from them, or really they'll never offer, and then it'll just become this horrible beast that they never wanted anyway, and then you'll never hear about it. You'll never hear the end of it until it's taken out of reserve status.
Exactly. Well, hey, our hour, guys. I can't thank you enough for coming on today. And I'll ask each one of you this, Chris. Best way for someone to get a hold of you, probably email, if they had questions?
Yeah, sure. Definitely email, and it is in the front of the magazine. But and for those who may be on that may have known our old company, they have all changed now. So it will be Chris, CHRIS period McLoone, MCLOONE at ClarionEvents.com. Clarion Events, all one word. But that's going to be your best bet.
And guys, for any of their emails, you can always hit me too. And Chris, before we move on to our next guest, if they wanted, what they got to do to get the magazine at their firehouse?
There is a link on our website up towards the top right-hand corner for subscribing. You fill out the form, and you should get it shortly thereafter.
You will not be sorry. The only problem is once it gets there, you're going to have a hard time tracking it down because it's going to end up all over the place. It's one of those ones that you have to actually get on a speaker and say, where's it at? Anyway, so, Bill, how does someone get a hold of you? And again, folks, if you need these guys to come out and teach classes for you, if you need some advice, you need their expertise, you need a consultant or whatever, Bill, how can they get a hold of you?
All right. The email is fireappwp. That's FIREAPP, like apparatus, WP like Willie P, at AOL.com. And if anybody has any questions or anything, I'd be happy to entertain the questions and answer them.
Well, one of the things I didn't mention, I was waiting till the end of the show about my good friend Bill Peters. He's also a Tom Brennan Lifetime Achievement Award winner at FDIC, and deservedly so. I was waiting till the end of the show to remind people of that. So,
as you are too, Rick, as you are.
Yeah, it still hasn't sunk in. Ricky, best way for them to get a hold of you if they wanted you to. I mean, Traditions Training's doing incredible stuff out there. Everywhere I go, if your guys have been there, it's always great feedback, and they were excited to have you there and can't wait to have you back. But if they want to get a hold of you and then talk a little bit about Traditions Training, we can get that too.
It's R Riley, RRILEY at traditionstraining.com, and I'll be more than happy to help you out with tradition stuff, or obviously my big passion now is apparatus, and all I can say about the company is, man, I got some phenomenal people that work for the company, and we're trying to hire younger and younger people, man, because it's a whole different teaching dynamic than when I started it. But we like to go out and teach a lot, and I appreciate the compliment. I'll be sure to pass it on to all the fellows.
Please do it, because I'm telling you, this is the fun thing about having the crew. The guests we had on the show today is we hit everything. I mean, with the exception of maybe paramedicine. What I'm saying? I could talk about that. I'm just saying it's not just tactics. It's if they want to bring you out to have you consult on helping them order apparatus, these are the people. If you want people to come out and teach your folks on pretty much anything in the fire service, this is the group. It's kind of fun. We've got a cast of incredible talent sitting here. So thank you guys, and hang on. Don't leave yet. Hey, folks, if you're looking to get a hold of me, it's pretty easy. Chief Lasky, Lasky @gmail.com. Hey, we're all on pretty much, for the most part, Facebook, Twitter, all the different Snapper chatters and Instagrams and all those different things. All the social media stuff that's out there. Actually, there's some pretty cool stuff. I know Chris, his folks, they post some great stuff on the social media sites for you to follow, especially if you're getting ready to order or apparatus or design a firehouse. Check out some of the stuff that he's posting there. But you can zip over to those sites and get a hold of us. Our next show date is April 17th, the week after FDIC, the big show, which is coming up. You can always catch some great shows and interact with some incredible people right here on Wednesdays, as well as the radio shows in the evening a lot of us do, which are really, really popular. But in closing, Terry and I, we always end our shows with this. Please keep the men and women in our armed forces and your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe, and God bless you. Thank you.